right. Welcome, everybody, to the latest episode of the VertiMax VIVE Podcast. I'm Al Merez. I'm going to be your host today. And we have a great guest joining us from Marquette University over in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm really excited to learn more about life as a D1 strength coach. But before we jump into that, just want to thank everybody for joining us. From all the various platforms that we're streaming live on to. So whether that's Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, as always, please jump in whenever you can with any questions that you might have for myself or for Coach, and then we'll make sure we get them answered as soon as we can. Feel free to put those into the comment section, whether that's YouTube, Facebook, wherever you need to, and like I said, we'll get those answered as soon as we can. We're also going to be hosting, this podcast in its entirety on all of the various podcast hosting sites. So if you can't stick around for this entire conversation, please be on the lookout for that once we get it uploaded there, in a week or so, once we get everything finalized. So without further ado, let me introduce Stu Roche here. He's the Assistant Director of Sports Performance at Marquette. As I mentioned earlier, his primary focus is on men's and women's lacrosse, as well as working with the men's and women's tennis teams. I know that he also takes great pride in being the Internship Coordinator at the school. And I know that's played a big role into his latest project that we're going to get into a little bit later on in the conversation called My Momentum. But before we dive into all of that, Stu, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Al. Yeah, super appreciate you having me on and I guess providing like a platform to be able to, listen to practitioners, not just strength coaches, but I know you've had some rock stars on this series. So I hope I can, stand in good stead with this company. But yeah, I appreciate the invitation.
That's right, man. You have some big shoes to fill. No, man, you're going to do just fine. I know we had a chance to get to know each other a little bit 2 years ago when we were out there, but
right.
All right, let's kick it off. If you would, just give us a quick background for you and your sports or your training background, and then, what ultimately got you into strength and conditioning.
Absolutely. Yeah, I guess I think I'll start from the end and work backwards kind of makes the most sense in my head. So currently at Marquette as one of the assistant directors of sports performance, and being really fortunate to be here for the last 6 years. It's the beginning of my 7th season at this school. And in fact, our staff has been together for that period of time as well. We've had very little turnover. So it's been refreshing to be in a place that is stable and strong and consistent over time. So being here, as you mentioned, working primarily with lacrosse programs and the tennis programs as well, and head up our kind of coach development program as well in the internship here at Marquette. So been here since 2015. Prior to moving over to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which I had no idea about before I accepted the role, but it turned out to be a pretty cool city. I was at the University of Michigan for a period of about 3 years from 2012 until 2015. And my role there was somewhat different to the prototypical strength coach journey. So my actual day job was to work in biomedical sciences in orthopedic research. So the kind of classic sitting in the lab at a bench, pipettes, microscope work, that kind of stuff. So I was working in a soft tissue lab looking at injuries to the shoulder, the hip, and the knee. And my primary focus was in the muscular atrophy and hypertrophy following injury. So I was looking at single muscle fiber contractility experiments and things like that. So that was a time in my life that I wasn't too sure exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew that surrounding myself with people that were far smarter than I was probably a good idea to push myself. So while I was doing that, I was also involved in strength conditioning as the lead sports performance coach for the men's and women's club rugby programs there in a voluntary capacity. But I kind of took that and run with it and started building that program along with the head coaches at the time, Matt Ranieri and Brandon Sparks. And so that was a great period of time, obviously staying in touch with the University of Michigan athletic department as well and helping out there where I could, because prior to landing the role in orthopedics, I spent a semester doing an internship at the University of Michigan with those guys. So under the direction of Bo Sandoval and alongside Lou Porciasso and Jason Cole and Caitlin Haycock. So learned a great deal from them. Super privileged to be able to come to the University of Michigan, to be able to take part in something like that. So that was kind of my introduction really to collegiate strength and conditioning in the US. And then the year prior to that, I did a study abroad semester, in fact, at the University of Michigan. So did my undergrad in the UK, originally from England. So I went to Loughborough University for sport and exercise science. And that opportunity to come across the States was something I didn't even think twice about. But on arrival, we didn't really hear much about the NCAA and the US collegiate system while I was growing up in England. And coming over to see, 140,000 or whatever capacity that stadium is, the population of the city doubling on a game day weekend was just insane to me. So it really sparked my interest in collegiate athletics and in strength and conditioning in particular. And so I kind of knew that was a path I wanted to follow as soon as I saw that. And super fortunate that the stars have aligned, and I've met some really good people along the way that has put me in a position here at an incredible university to be able to, do what I love to do. So really that's kind of what the journey looked like.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know here in the States, we kind of only can imagine what Premier League, football is like over in Europe, and I think it could probably relate a little bit to what the crazy fans are like with the major D1 football here.
Right.
That's awesome. So the study, abroad is kind of what opened your eyes or opened up the opportunity to come to the States.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was an opportunity that was, the classic. You're an undergrad, you get hundreds of emails from your department and different groups on campus, and most of them you just disregard, but this is one I happened to read, and it almost seemed too good to be true. So fortunately I was one of the few that read it, and they had quite a few different options open, and so it wasn't too cumbersome of a task to submit the material to apply for that role. And I was fortunate to be given that, and actually my wife laughs at this quite often, because my original choice was to go to Sydney in Australia, because it was from January through May of 2010. And so I was like, I'm out of here. I'm heading to the sun and the surf, have a good time in Australia. And the exchange officer sat me down and said, "Hey, we like your application. We'd like to give you first choice of where you want to go." So I said, "Sydney." And he said, "You don't want to go to Sydney. You want to go to Michigan." So I said, I'm going to go to Michigan. So, it's crazy how things happen for a reason, right? And it's crazy how that transpired and came out in 2010, and haven't looked back since. So it's been a great ride.
Yeah, winters in Michigan are going to be just a tad different than that time of the year.
A little bit, right? Keep you on your toes. Yeah, definitely.
Growing up in Ohio, I can relate to what those winters are like. But now I got out and moved to Tampa, Florida. So
smart man.
And we're just getting into that time for you there in Wisconsin, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the leaves changing and weather's turning a little bit.
Leaves changing, yeah. Winter is coming, as they say.
Yeah, buddy. Awesome, man. Well, so there you are at Marquette now, and kind of just summarize some of your responsibilities there and what day-to-day life is there as the assistant director.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So we have a staff of 5 total. Our director is Todd Smith. His wife works in the department as well, Maggie Smith. So they're both responsible for the men's and women's basketball programs. And then myself, Dan Kent-Hull, and Emily Jacobson are the assistant directors as well. And we work with the remainder of the sports at Marquette. So typically speaking, we have between 3 and 4 sports each outside of Todd and Maggie. And so we're responsible for delivering the service of sports performance enhancement for those teams. So we have roughly 300 student athletes, give or take, most years, and obviously a mixture of male and female teams, with basketball being our kind of flagship program. So yeah, responsible for all facets of sports performance enhancement, whether that be in this room, down at the field. Obviously, as similar to many other universities out there, we don't have necessarily a sports science department or a data analytics department under the umbrella of athletics. So we take on those responsibilities too, which is, both, I think, kind of one person or the other. You either feel that's a burden and it's tough on you, or you kind of get fascinated rather than frustrated, and you kind of dive in with both feet. And I think the staff here has done a really good job of that, of actually embracing the technology, even though we might not know exactly what we're doing when we first get our hands on it. But we're diligent to learning to make sure we're applying what we're doing so that we can make the impact with the student athletes. Obviously, at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. So outside of those kind of daily responsibilities, just as you mentioned, I'm the director of the Coach Development Program here, which is something that I spoke with our boss, Todd Smith, like very early on in the job application process. It's something I really wanted to do. I'd had a little bit of experience of mentoring a few coaches, even through my time at Michigan with the rugby programs. And I loved doing it. And I think it was more so because, one, yes, giving back to the next generation, which has become more and more of a reason as I progress in the profession, but also because I feel like when I have to teach somebody else something, I really have to learn it and understand why it matters and why something doesn't matter, and choosing potentially the quote unquote right thing to do at the right time, or are there better options? So yeah, it's been really, really good, and we've developed over the years. It was funny because the very first semester I was here, you obviously are familiar with our boss Todd Smith, but he is a people's person. And so the very first semester where he said, "Here are the reins to the internship program. I have 15 interns for you this semester." Because he would just go to undergraduate ex-phys classes, fire up the whole class. All of a sudden, at the end of that class, every single student wants to be a strength conditioning coach. And he says, "All right, meet our new internship coordinator at 6 a.m. on Monday morning." And sure enough, 15 of them roll up. And it's been a healthy program since then. But it's a fabric of what we do. As with many universities, it's really important for us to have our young and aspiring coaches coming through. And I kind of take that role and responsibility super seriously. And I pour as much energy and effort into the internship program as I do my other teams. That's important to me.
That's awesome. No, you do a great job with that. And it's important, how you can influence young coaches in a way. And I know you and your team there of strength coaches have such a great culture in that weight room, and the athletes and the buy-in and everything that you get there from just my time and being there around you. Walk us through, kind of how you envision your weight room and what it means to your athletes and kind of that culture.
Yeah, I think, the C word culture is like thrown around pretty consistently in sport in general, and rightly so. I think it's clearly very, very important. And I think it should be a centerpiece to what we're doing. So a phrase that we use pretty often in here is that the development of athletic qualities from this room should be a byproduct of the culture of the team that moves through here. And so, just like you said, if we have buy-in from the athletes, if we have buy-in because of well-established relationships and rapport with the head sport coaches, that they trust us, they trust that we're going to do a great job with our student athletes and prepare them to be robust, resilient, and high-performing athletes, then the buy-in is there. And if you have the buy-in, you have the intent. If you have the intent, then the byproduct is increased strength, increased speed, increased agility. And so I think that's big. I think it's in contrast to kind of what I've seen having grown up in the UK and moved to the US. The cultural piece is really, really big, but I think it sometimes gets confused. I think a lot of young coaches tend to think culture is all about shouting and chest pumping and getting in people's faces, and it's not that. Like the quietest word or the quietest conversation you have with an athlete that just pushes the right buttons, that could change their trajectory on their 4 or 5 year career. And so whether it's a all-encompassing culture that we have with the teams in here, or the culture that you have as a one-on-one individual developing a relationship with an athlete, that's monumental in what can happen in this room. I think it really sets a foundation for that. And so, as you expect, the culture isn't necessarily exactly the same for one team versus another. And I think that's driven primarily by the lead sport coach. Obviously, we have our same philosophies in this weight room in terms of the culture we want to establish too. And we have the same philosophies in terms of the principles of training that we deliver as well. I don't think Coach Todd Smith would have hired all of us if we had completely disparate views of exactly how to train a collegiate athlete for Division I competition. But yeah, to cut a long story short, culture is, I think you have to lead with it. You have to be consistent with it. And that's super important.
Cool. No, you hit on the training differences and philosophies. And I kind of, one of our first questions we had here from IT was, what differences, if any, have you found between the UK and the US, and how coaches program and implement training strategies?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've kind of set you up for that. And unfortunately, I don't have a great answer because most of my really professional career and professional development has been in the US surrounding collegiate coaches. So I didn't actually have any developmental experiences while I was in England and while I was studying at Loughborough University. So it's hard for me to say. What I can say from like the outside looking in is, I think strength conditioning as a profession is developing at a fast rate, right? The earliest professional strength conditioning coach wasn't until like the 70s or the 80s, really, in terms, certainly in the collegiate setting. And so I think it's not too dissimilar in terms of the profession in the UK as well. And so I think things are moving forward in terms of the scope of strength conditioning coaches, the responsibilities they have, the respect that they're given, and the fact that I think people are starting to understand that it takes education and experience to understand how to program well and be agile in your programming, depending on the context of the group you have in front of you, whether it's youth training, collegiate training, professional training, how dense the competition calendars are for those sports, whether it's contact, non-contact, all those kinds of things. So yeah, unfortunately, IT, I don't really have like a great answer. There are, I mean, as I'm sure you're aware, there are some outstanding coaches from all around the world, and they all have different ways of delivering their coaching. I mean, you see guys, even though he's not necessarily a strength conditioning coach, but guys like Dan Paff with Altis, who is softly spoken, but again, he has a way with words where he can just say one thing at the right time, and that changes the whole cueing context of a movement that he's trying to help an athlete with. And so I love to see it. I love to see the different coaching styles. Whenever I visit universities or see videos online, I try not to be too trigger happy with making a judgment as to whether I think that coach is a good coach or not, or what their culture is like, because it's all contextual dependent. But yeah, there definitely, I'm sure there are differences.
Oh yeah, you're gonna find good coaches wherever you go, and it's we have a UK distributor I talk to quite often, and they're using a lot of the same equipment over there, and they're doing a lot of the same drills that we're doing here, and now with the internet and how free information is exchanged, it's created a much smaller world, and it's cool to see the differences and similarities. The one thing that really stuck in my head when I was out there with you, and you talked about your MVP process for your athletes and kind of what that means. And so if you can just kind of hint on what that means, what it is, and how it affects your athletes.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, I think so. MVP process standing for mission, vision, principles. So what is your mission? What are you striving to do? Kind of like reverse engineering the process. What's your mission? What's your ultimate goal? What's your vision? And how do you reverse engineer the process of the mission, thereby establishing what you need to do on a monthly, a weekly, a daily, and then in the moment to establish that kind of that culture per se. And then the principles that underlie that mission, vision, purpose. So a number of different teams on campus have established this kind of MVP process within their own team. Many of them have actually worked with an external consultant to Marquette called Brian Kane, who's been really integral in making sure that happens and making sure it's consistent. And so, for example, a women's lacrosse team, they might have an acronym that encompasses their principles of their mission, vision, and principles, or purpose, if you want to call it that. And so it's something that it's consistent to them. It's something that they live their life by, not only as a student, but as an athlete and a person, something that really applies to all those different facets of life. It's cliche, but I think we talk about it a lot. We need to be able to positively influence what's happening with the athletes that are under our wing in the 20 hours, 22 hours, whatever it is that they're outside of the facility. Not because we want to be a big brother to them and spy on them and make sure they're doing what they said they were doing, but to help them achieve the goals that they're looking to achieve, because obviously if you're only putting money into a bank when you're in the weight room or on the training field, but you're taking out a lot when you're outside of the room, then clearly your balance is going to suffer, right? So we need to make sure that their MVP process, they know what their MVP process is, they've gone through it, and importantly, they've established it. It comes from the team themselves. It's not coming from us saying, you must do X, Y, Z, that's our MVP process. every year the team gets together as a new team. We call it Burning Day, just like a kind of phoenix rising from the flames. It's Burning Day, and you get rid of the old one and you think about the new one, and you bring in all the new personalities of the incoming freshmen and maybe graduate transfer students, and you start the next MVP process. And yes, maybe there's going to be some similarities in there, but it's owned by the team of that specific calendar year. I think that's important too.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Well, so much can change over one year to the next, and kind of being able to maneuver and deal with whatever's right in front of you is very important. Leading us right to the next question I wanted to get into is COVID. Obviously nobody had that in the plans. So, having culture and having buy-in and having everybody on the same page, kind of moving in the same direction, makes it easier when stuff like that comes up. So you can kind of pivot together and have that buy-in. And, what were you guys dealing with there specifically with COVID, and how did that affect the university and your job as a strength coach and cleaning things and having the weight room ready? And man, I can't imagine.
Yes. Yeah. Weirdly, the pandemic wasn't in the textbook through university. So we were all learning, every single day was a new day, and we just had to be ready to adapt, as everyone did. And it's been a tough year. I think it's been a tough year for many different reasons. And I'm not one to downplay it at all. But again, I think it's all about perspective of not getting frustrated, but getting fascinated and thinking, there's a problem here, but am I going to be a problem person, or am I going to be a solution person? So finding the ways to kind of work around it. And I acknowledge the weight room we have behind us, in the sense that we are super fortunate to have the space we do and have the facilities and equipment that we do, that we could have a decent number of people in here and still be in line with the regulations in terms of 6 foot distancing, mask wearing indoors, cleaning equipment, not sharing equipment, all that kind of stuff. So it was challenging. Our staff was furloughed for a number of months when it first happened back in 2020. But we just kind of gracefully played our role, and we were able to come back later in the summer and kind of get to work again. So that was a challenging time, but a good time to kind of sit and reflect before we attack the rest of the year. And so now we're at a point where we can intermingle teams. In the previous semesters, we had to have only single teams in here, so we didn't have any cross contamination, if you want to call it that, cross contamination cases across different teams. But now that has kind of subsided as vaccination rates have gone up, and so it's gotten a little bit easier. I think it's interesting though, because it's made me again think about like what matters most, in terms of, you may not be able to set the weight room up for the athletes prior to their arrival, or you may not be able to have a group of 3 or 4 athletes at a rack, whereby it's much quicker to be able to set up a whole rack with a safety squat bar with catches up and chains on, right? For one person to do that, it takes them 3-4 minutes. And so you kind of think about the theory and the training science, but then also the application given the current circumstances. And so it made me really think about like what matters most, keep things simple, and go back to the basics, which is, what I had to do when I was at Michigan with the rugby teams, with no facility, no budget. What matters most, think about how you're going to apply force to the ground and have progressive overload. And it really just kind of came back to that. So again, silver linings, it's been a bit of a mental reset for me to go back to the basics and do what matters most, really.
Yeah, sometimes you can get caught up with all the gadgets and all the tools, and
100%.
And you kind of lose focus on just sprinting and running fast, right? And the basics of jumping and running. That's awesome. Now, was it difficult with a lot of like individual workouts where they're doing it at home, or were you trying to keep athletes kind of moving forward when things got shut down?
It was challenging. We got together as a department and tried to figure out the best way to do that. A lot of obviously at-home programs, many different student athletes, either they were in a state whereby the facilities they use, whether that's a performance facility or just a regular gym, was still open. Others, it was shut down, and then it kind of flipped on its head, and then everyone was shut down. So it was a lot of pivoting to trying to deliver a program. We don't subscribe to anything like Team Builder, whereby you can send those things out, or a bridge or anything like that. And so a lot of it was, I actually used an application called Trello, which is typically a task management app, kind of like Slack or Monday. And so I was using Trello because you could input graphics and videos and things like that in there. Now, not great for like actually reporting on there in terms of an athlete reporting back to me, but that just occurred through staying in touch via phone call and email. So yeah, again, just finding ways to be a solution guy rather than a problem guy. And we managed to figure it out pretty well. But luckily, yeah, we were able to come back into this facility reasonably soon on with all the policies in place. And with room size limitations, it was a bit more difficult. I think not last semester, maybe, but the semester before, we had a total of 2 15-minute periods throughout the entire week where there wasn't a group in this weight room. Wow. So it was dense. It was very busy, but again, better than the alternative. I know there's been some unfortunate circumstances with people losing their jobs through the pandemic, and so yeah, I can't acknowledge enough how lucky I am to still be in this role and seemingly coming out the other side of it, which is great.
It's awesome. And then I know that now that things are kind of getting back to normal, you can get back to your passion of giving back and helping the next generation and doing all the things that you really want to do, as well as, kind of direct the sports performance there. So, and I know kind of all your history of internships and going abroad, and then, kind of helping the next generation and working with younger coaches has led you to this idea of my momentum. And, we were able to kind of get on board early on with you and help support that, because it's also something that we believe in here at VertiMax. We're lucky enough to deal with the private sector of private, strength coaches in the sports performance world, as well as, Division I schools and pro teams. So we can kind of see all spectrums across the board of strength and conditioning. And so when we saw kind of what you were trying to do and help lead the younger, coaches to find internships and jobs and kind of having an access point for that, it was definitely something that piqued our interest in our involvement. So if you can, tell us a little bit about momentum, kind of where it started, the concept, and kind of where you're at today.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you for hopping on board. You've been a great support to us so far, and long may that continue. But my momentum, it really came out of the realization over this last 5 or 6 years, having been the internship coordinator here, that every semester we'll have anywhere between 4 and 6 intern coaches roll through. And I can probably count on 1 or 2 hands the number of coaches that still remain in the profession even after those 5 or 6 years. And most of them are juniors, seniors, maybe they have already graduated when they come to us. And so there's this massive attrition rate in the number of coaches that come through versus the number that go on to secure a graduate assistantship or an assistant position or whatever. And obviously that's multifactorial, right? Some of them may realize after time that this isn't for me, and that's a great decision. They've had a good experience and they've come to that reckoning. And so that's okay. But even then, having spoken with a number of young coaches as to why did the road, come to a stop for you? What was the reasoning behind it? A lot of times it tended to be opportunities weren't there for me. Financially, it was really, really difficult to be able to continue to do that. I didn't have the network or the resources to be able to travel to create my network, to go to conferences, to go across the country to another internship program that I know would have been really good for me. And so it seems like there's kind of this chasm between the developmental opportunities that you might experience as an undergraduate, but then actually making that next step into the profession. And so my momentum came about as an idea between myself and another individual here at Marquette, Jordan Smith, in terms of giving back to the next generation, because pretty much every strength coach out there wants the profession to continue to grow, continue to develop. There's a lot of both positive and negative conversations about that at the moment. And so again, I wanted to be a bit of a positive force for change, leading with the next generation of coaches. And so I thought, what way could we, or particularly myself and then the coaches I associate myself with, how can we mentor these young coaches more broadly in those kind of formative years of their career and help them make that transition and help pull down some of the barriers of entry in terms of being able to communicate and create a network and go to conferences and things like that. And so, this past summer, we came up with the idea of running the My Momentum seminar, which was a 2-day event, 4 hours in each day. We had 3 awesome speakers from both collegiate and private and pro settings, actually, jump on board. They delivered a super interactive and kind of actionable webinar series. That was like a big thing for us, is making sure that there are like strategies involved as to how to develop. We kind of strayed away from the X's and O's, and that was intentional. We didn't say, here's a session on speed development, or here's a session on how to progress in terms of strength or conditioning or whatever it is. It was more so surrounding, how do you move forward in the profession? How can you create an outstanding resume? How do you develop both breadth and depth in your knowledge, or understand what we might term, John Waggle talked about something called fool's gold, whereby it's something that everyone's maybe talking about, but realistically it doesn't really give you that much knowledge in an area, or it isn't a high value piece of knowledge to know. So it was more so focused around that. So we had about 65 attendees to that, which was amazing. And then we had a really cool event at the end of it in this space called Gather, which is kind of like a proximity-based Zoom session. So it was just a bit more organic. I think we talked about before we came online here, like a lot of these online events are becoming a bit old hat. They're kind of samey, can be somewhat awkward sometimes if you're dropped into a room with somebody who you don't know. This Gather environment is almost like a computer game. It's like a 6-bit Super Mario game or Pokemon game. So you can move your character around the screen. As soon as you come close to somebody, your videos pop up, and it's just a bit more organic. So in that way, our young coaches from all around the world, really, they could walk up to Coach Ron McKeefrey and start a conversation. So it felt really cool. It's something that's been like a unique feature, and I think we'll certainly have that in the next one too. So it's been really, really good.
Yeah, no, that was very unique and cool, and like you said, something that's gotten very popular is these virtual podcasts and live casts and webinars, and you kind of have to do it nowadays with the pandemic. But to offer an opportunity where you could have 50 or 100 people in a room, but you can also have these little private conversations and go from one to the other very easily. And what was the feedback from the coaches and the participants and the speakers from that seminar?
Oh, great. Yeah, really positive feedback. But yeah, both from the speakers and from the individuals too. And obviously the premise behind it, the driving force behind it is, again, to give back to the next generation of coaches, to kind of give them that foot up into the profession. And so while we offered payment to all of the speakers, they said, take it back, roll it back into the grant fund, which is something I forgot to mention, in that 100% of the revenue that was generated from the ticket sales was immediately pooled into a grant fund pot, which was turned around and just like shot back out at the attendee. So every attendee that attended the seminar this summer, they had the opportunity to apply to the grant fund and apply for something that they needed financial support with. So we were able to support 4 individuals in the end. We generated about $1,400 worth of grant fund money. And so we supported a couple of individuals in getting their CSCS qualifications, the USAW, attending American Association of Sports Psychology Conference, and a couple others. So it was really cool and rewarding to get to the point where that idea of like, how can we be more impactful, broadly speaking, to be able to do that and send those checks out and help them out in that way. So yeah, it was really, really cool to bring that all together.
Yeah, that was definitely a great start for year one of something new like this, something different. So I'm sure those 4 were really appreciative for whatever support you guys were able to give them.
Mm-hmm.
And so then what was new this year so far with Momentum? I know you've had some changes, some additions to it. What's been the latest launch?
Yes. Yeah. So really this last couple of weeks, but certainly towards the end of this week, it's going to be more online, more publicly available and heard about. And it's something I'm super excited about. It's called My Momentum Connect. And so the seminar is obviously at the moment a once annual thing, potentially becoming a biannual thing, or twice yearly thing in subsequent years. But we wanted to find a way that how could we provide even more engagement and value to these young coaches. And so we started thinking about internship opportunities, graduate assistantship opportunities, all those kind of developmental roles that exist in not just the collegiate setting, but in private facilities too, in tactical high school facilities, things like that. Mm-hmm. And so we thought, well, we spoke to a couple of up and coming strength conditioning coaches and said, when you were looking for your internships, where did you typically look? And a lot of them said, well, I went to the NSCA job board or the CSCCA or NCAA Marketplace, more and more so now on Instagram, just kind of happening across these opportunities. And so for us, we thought, well, those those websites, you have to go to one and then to the other, and maybe there's one opportunity on one and one on the other, and it's kind of a bit of a crapshoot as to, do you find the right one for you? And so we investigated it a bit, and I used the CSCCA job board a lot as well. And that's where I would have gone. But when we went there, we realized it's all like text heavy. It tends to be the case that a lot of the information is kind of buried, the key information that you're looking for. It's not super inspirational. A lot of them kind of like sound the same, and really you don't answer the questions of like, who's the person I'm actually going to be working with for the next 4 months? I'm about to drive across the country and perform this unpaid voluntary role for my development, which I'm happy to do. But I want to know, like, what does that person look like? What do they sound like? How do they carry themselves? What facility am I going to be in? So I just thought we need to do a better job of centralizing this stuff and actually answering these questions and giving them a like vastly more engaging resource for them to think about, where do I want to develop? Because there are some amazing internships at some very small schools in the middle of nowhere. Mm-hmm. And that might be the best suited place for that individual, but because they don't know about it, they just know about a Power 5 school or something like that. They go there and maybe they waste their time. And that's like super unfortunate, because you hear about those kind of nightmare stories where, for whatever reason, if maybe the internship program isn't well established, or the coaches just simply don't have enough time to be able to pour into the young coaches, that match isn't a good match. And so with My Momentum Connect, what we're doing is we're trying to build basically the only site that you need to go to find developmental opportunities for sports performance coaches. Like I say, not just in a collegiate setting, but in the professional, private, high school, tactical. And so every single institution will have their own page. All they need to do is go to mymomentumpro.com/connect. And on there's a link to submit your listing. And you just fill in the form in terms of how many coaches there are, how many intern coaches there typically are, what your curriculum is, all those kinds of things. And we develop this beautiful looking page with a interview video with the internship coordinator, a fly through video of the weight room. So again, we're trying to answer those questions in a much more like media rich way, basically. So the website is currently live. I have a very busy schedule over the next couple of weeks with recording a bunch of interviews and getting these websites built for people, but it's completely free of charge. Again, we're looking to provide a really nice resource, and we're hoping it's going to be something that will kick off in a big way.
Oh, that's great. And it is live. So we'll include the link when we post this video to our channels. We'll make sure that there's a link in there.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
So is it your responsibility to reach out to all the schools to get these interviews done, to create these pages, or are you going to hopefully at some point have the schools kind of submitting all that information on their own?
Right. At the moment, yeah, I'm reaching out to individual coaches as I see. Again, I'm going to the NSCA job boards, CSCCA job boards, and finding them, reaching out, saying, hey, I recently saw your posting. How about we build a website for you? But hopefully, yeah, in the future, it will become known that we have this opportunity. We'd love to have like our very own website that's like customized for us and has all our content on there. And yeah, anyone can submit that listing. I'd be happy to throw it up there. And again, allow young coaches to come there and see, what do I want to do? Who do I mesh with well based on the interview video? What kind of curriculum am I looking for? Because some universities might have a really good entry-level internship whereby it's like the basics and that's what somebody needs, versus somebody else might be 2 or 3 internships deep and they're looking for that one that really helps them understand the data analytics side, and they happen to have a strong program in that. Those are the kinds of things that you might not necessarily understand in a typical internship posting, but when we have these interviews, those are the questions that are going to be asked.
That's awesome. Yeah, a lot of good stuff happening there. Anything kind of behind the curtain that you can talk about with My Momentum is going in the future, or anything new besides that? Obviously, this is a big first step, but anything else?
Yeah. Yeah, there are always ideas bubbling around in my head and with Jordan as well. And Jordan's role, my colleague in this, his role is to kind of pull me back and be like, let's focus on one thing at a time and do it well. But we have some ideas. I think we'll look to leverage that gather environment again in the context of My Momentum Connect. So again, maybe having almost like pop-up shops where tonight we're going to have XYZ internship coordinators at universities A, B, and C. They're going to be in the gather space. Here's the code. Join us at 8 p.m. tonight if you want to hop in there and learn about their programs. So we're hoping to develop something like that, almost like a internship fair, but a virtual one again, so that they can really speak with the person, understand who they are, what they're about, and ask the questions they want to ask. Because unless they were to submit an application and receive an email or a phone call to say, hey, we'd like to interview you, you can't ask those questions, right? So again, hoping to provide some kind of space to do that. But that's maybe a semester, 2 semesters into the future, but we think that could be a pretty cool way again of continuing to connect the strength conditioning industry, really, especially with this new generation.
It's awesome, man. Well, Stu, I really appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule. I know you have a lot of interviews, a lot of people to be talking to right now. But really, really thanks for jumping on here. Tell us a little bit more about Marquette and obviously what you have going on there, and then My Momentum. Like we said, VertiMax is a big fan of that movement and what you're doing there. So happy to help support that any way we can.
I appreciate that. Yeah, thanks very much for inviting me on, and thanks for the friendship and all that you guys do at VertiMax for supporting us guys who are trying to make people fast.
That's it, man. We're all in the same fight together, man.
Exactly.
All right, man. For anybody that's listening that listens to this later on, that's not following you or My Momentum, please give them an idea where to find you and how they can connect and learn more.
Absolutely. Yeah. Best place to find us obviously is at the website. So it's mymomentumpro.com, and they'll have all the links in there to be able to direct towards the seminar pages, the connect pages, the grant fund pages. So that's all there online. And then also Instagram account is pretty active and live most of the time. And that's just at mymomentum_P. And then my own personal Instagram account, if you want to see pictures of my dog and my wife, then that's just at Stuart Roche 1. But yeah, more than happy to engage. If anyone wants to reach out, we also have an email address, contactmymomentum@gmail.com. So more than happy to field any questions or hop on calls or interact via DM on Instagram, and happy to hear what people have to say and whether they think they have a good idea if maybe you should consider doing X, Y, or Z. Always happy.
It's good, man. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks again, Stu. All right, everybody, that's it for today. Go out and have a great day. Thanks.
Thanks a lot.